Alrighty, the video for today is a topic that I've been wanting to cover for a long time, and I couldn't quite figure out the right method for doing it, but I think I might have it today. The idea that we're going to talk about today is this idea that police officers lack sympathy and compassion, that we're not compassionate people, that we're too much of a warrior and not enough of a guardian, is what a lot of people are saying. And what they're trying to, and what I see in a lot of the comments, I guess I should say, is that we're hiring the wrong people. That if you are a police officer and you don't have sympathy and compassion, and you're not treating people on the street with a tremendous amount of sympathy and compassion, then you should not have become a police officer in the first place. That's what people are saying. And they're trying to say, you know, that we're hiring people that don't have sympathy and compassion. Well, that's not true. That's actually the opposite of what is true, because almost everybody that I know that was hired as a police officer, including myself, I remember what it was like when I was new. I hit the street and I was the most sympathetic and compassionate person that you've ever met in your life. And the job, not the training, but the actual job, the things that I experience on a day-to-day basis have changed the way I react and respond to people, making it appear that a lot of times I lack sympathy and compassion. That's not really the truth. It's just I've adapted the way I do the job as a result of things that I have learned over the years. The main kind of way that we're going to talk about this is going to be a concept called compassion fatigue. That's going to be what the video is going to be about today. Alrighty, so in the introduction, I talked about compassion fatigue, and before we can actually talk about it, we need to define it. This definition, I believe I actually pulled from the Canadian health system. I don't know, if you Google compassion fatigue, you're going to see a whole lot of different articles from a whole lot of different sources. This is just the one that I thought summed it up the easiest. Compassion fatigue is the cost of caring for others and their emotional pain resulting from the desire to help relieve the suffering of others. It's also known as vicarious or secondary trauma, referencing the way that other people's trauma can be their own. The symptoms of compassion fatigue can make it more difficult to provide care. That's going to be like the basis for the video today. And I would also break it down a little bit further when it comes to police officers, because the definition that you saw there, and I can bring it back up, this is more related to medical caretakers. You know, this is medical professionals. This is what this definition is really geared toward, but I think it also applies to police officers, firefighters, and even school teachers. My wife is a school teacher, and we were talking about this very subject last night. Now, there's multiple types of compassion fatigue, but also there's multiple aspects to why someone might change their approach when dealing with people. I've got two main factors I think that apply to police officers I want to discuss today. It also applies to firefighters and teachers and everything, as I was talking with my wife about last night. The first one is sympathy, treating people with a tremendous amount of sympathy, making them feel that you really care about their problem and that you're there for them, and, you know, kind of being this like hands-off, super nice and friendly, not even friendly, but super nice and just sympathetic person towards them. And I've seen over the years, and this is exactly what my wife was talking about last night, dealing with one of her students, is that there are a lot of people who feed off of sympathy, a lot of sympathy sponges out there, for lack of a better term. And I've actually got a video that was on the YouTube channel. I'll go ahead and pull it up here. Sorry. I'll pull it up here and get myself out of the way. You may or may not remember this video that was on the YouTube channel. I'm going to play a little clip from it here in a moment. I'll get completely out of the way. But this was a video where we had a brand new police officer. I believe this was his second phase of FTO. So he'd been on he went through the academy. He had been on the street for approximately 5 to 6 weeks at this point in time. The woman in this video is what I call a sympathy sponge. If you give her all the sympathy in the world, she's just going to absorb that, and she's going to take advantage of you because of your sympathy. I have learned over the years when dealing with people just like her, not to give her sympathy, to be a little bit more strict, more direct, and they'll actually, they'll snap to, and they'll act appropriately. Most people that don't have training or experience on the road don't understand this. And they think that you're being mean to this person. I have another example of an officer reacting to a drug overdose in a very similar manner to the way that I respond to people that are overdosed on drugs. But the first example I want to show is going to be this young officer dealing with this woman. We're going to play a little clip. I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to show you the opposite approach.
Okay. All right, so they want me?
Yeah.
Cynthia, yeah.
Chill out.
It's okay. It's okay. Cynthia, it's all right.
Please, you guys, please.
It's not up to us.
It's not
No,
up to
you
us.
guys, this isn't fair.
It's
No.
a minor misdemeanor.
yeah.
It's a misdemeanor, okay?
No, man, no, I don't want to go to jail.
I know.
No.
Cynthia, come on.
No. Okay.
You don't have to get on the ground.
It's fine. I'm sorry.
Just relax.
I'm sorry.
Alrighty, so in a situation like this, she was sucking up all of the sympathy. She thought that the officers being sympathetic was going to allow her to get away. And as an experienced police officer, look, this didn't go anywhere bad. This was fine. But as an experienced police officer, there are some danger cues that sometimes pop up as a result of this kind of behavior. If you notice, the moment that she realized she was definitely under arrest, she stood up, she started backing away from the officers. If this wasn't her, if this was a 22-year-old man, this is a flight or fight moment for that person. In this particular case, the way we're trained, once you run somebody for warrants and you're told that they have a possible warrant, that's actually the moment that you go and put cuffs on them and throw them in your car. That means they're already in cuffs and they're having to start to come to the realization that, yes, they are going to go to jail. A lot of people think that that's cruel and mean and whatever, but it's the safest thing in the long run. And it helps that person begin to deal with a situation that is inevitable, because you already know that this warrant is going to be good, but you're giving them hope that the warrant is not going to be good. The reason you're giving them hope is because you're sympathetic to them. You realize they don't want to go to jail, that they feel really bad about what's about to happen. But it's not going to change the fact that it's still going to happen. I don't believe that all this additional sympathy and sugarcoating makes anything better for anyone in the long run. As a matter of fact, what I see is she was actually kind of mentally being tortured by this situation. This is stuff that every police officer does when they're new. I was just like him. I remember I arrested a guy for domestic violence. It was probably my first domestic violence arrest on the west side of town when I was on phase 2 coaching. So I was actually in a very similar position to him. I started off the arrest appropriately, had a good 911 call with a good caller, good identification of the suspect. I went out, I walked up the house, the suspect was on the porch. I figured out who he was immediately. I put cuffs on him, put him in the car. That actually all went well. Problem is, when you're brand new and you're doing your paperwork, it takes hours. And I had a lot of sympathy for this guy. I hadn't arrested a lot of people at the time. So I'm trying to be really nice to him, very compassionate to him. He was laying down. We had the Crown Vics back then. He was laying down across the back seat, and I goofed up, and I asked him to lay on his side or his back because I don't want him to positionally asphyxiate, because in my brain, that's the truth. In reality, I should have just gone back there, sat him up, and buckled him back up. But I planted that seed into his brain. Next thing you know, he's faking a heart attack, faking that he can't breathe, faking that he's positionally asphyxiated. Ambulance came. We had to take him to the hospital. That extended the arrest by about 4 hours, all because I was being sympathetic and compassionate and put that idea into his head. And I learned a lesson that day. The next video that I want to show is kind of the opposite reaction to that one with the new officer. The next video we're going to look at is going to be an experienced officer.
Hey, listen.
Sorry, it's going to be, I'm going to get myself back out of the way. This one right here. If you don't remember this particular video, this was shot at a Taco Bell. This guy was out, and I'll play a little video from it here in a moment. He was out jumping around, flopping around on the ground, high on probably a combination of fentanyl and methamphetamine. And It's a combination of fentanyl and methamphetamine, and having been high for several days in a row. His body is rebelling against him, and you get all twitchy and all these other things. The officer in this video, it was amazing. If you look through the comments, which I'm not going to do right now, people were losing their minds. You're like, this officer has no compassion, no sympathy. What an asshole. You know, all these things. He shouldn't be a cop if he's going to act like that. The officer in this particular video, I know him very well. I've known him for 13 years, which is the exact same amount of time that I've been a police officer, because we went to the academy together. We both have a very similar set of experiences. We've both worked the same side of town for our entire careers. We have both experienced this situation with this guy hundreds, if not thousands of times over our careers. We have experienced what it's like when you give people a lot of sympathy and how they play into it. We also realize that you're not necessarily going to change anyone's life by being super sympathetic and compassionate. The best thing you can do often is just to get your job done. And this is something that you gain with experience. And you could also say it's a coping mechanism. It's a coping mechanism due to this idea of compassion fatigue. Let's watch a moment of this video, and then I'll be back.
What is going on with you? Do you need a medic? Have a seat. Sit down. Sit down.
Oh. I tried to tell.
You tried to what?
I'm tired of being in the hospital, sir.
Well, you're on drugs or something. I mean, this ain't normal.
Please don't make a big deal out of this. Please don't.
I have to make a big deal out of it. Do you need a medic?
What hospital will I go to from here?
Probably doctors.
Where are we at?
We're on the west side. Do you know your name? Huh? What is it, Nathan?
I'm so thirsty.
I'll get you some water. What's your first name? Sir. What is your first name?
It's Adrian.
Adrian?
All right, so we're back to this video, and I moved it to a spot where you could see the guy a little bit better. You know, you notice that the officers are just being very straight and very blunt with him. They want his information. A lot of people were upset with the officers for trying to gain his information because they thought the officers were trying to get him in trouble. That's not true. They're just trying to get his identity, so when the medic gets there, they can load him up on the medic. They can give the medics this guy's information. They can look him up in the computer, know his medical history, get him to the hospital, and you're good to go. The other thing is, the symptoms that this guy is experiencing or exhibiting, this is what we used to call excited delirium. For some reason, the social justice warriors said you're no longer allowed to call it excited delirium, so they call it something else. I don't know what they call it anymore, but it's excited delirium. The reason he was saying that he's thirsty is because he's starting to fry. His core body temperature is elevating, and he's feeling very hot, and he wants water. This is just a very normal symptom of somebody that's experiencing excited delirium. These people can become unconscious, and they can die from this. And as a police officer, when you're the first ones on scene, you're there before the medics, there's really nothing that you can do for this person other than stand there and wait for medics. You can give him water. It's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to make him feel any better. And the officers did eventually go get him some water. But if this guy becomes unconscious or dies, it sure would be nice to have his name and date of birth, so at least you know how to track down his next of kin. That's what the officers are doing in this situation. They're just like straight to the facts, boom, 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 boom. These are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. I think this might be a good time to talk about it, or maybe I'll do it here. Oh no, I need my screen up. So when it comes to compassion fatigue and dealing with these things, and like the sympathy, it's really hard for me to put into words, but you have to remember that when you are providing emotional support to another person, you have to like make yourself slightly vulnerable in order to do that. That's what part of compassion fatigue really is. And, if you do that time and time and time again, you're getting that secondary trauma from that person. You're putting yourself in their shoes and experiencing this with them. That's enough to drive a normal person crazy. And I want to kind of go over the numbers for that with you, just to give you something kind of to consider. Because when you're watching these videos and you're seeing the officers deal with this guy right here, this might be the first time, second time, or you know, one of the few times that you've ever even witnessed this, and you're witnessing it through a screen. You know, you're not there, you're not experiencing it, you are not responsible for this person. So your experience is very different from what the police officer's experience is. And I want to kind of share with you how frequently a police officer does this, and kind of how this kind of builds up on a person. That's why I got the calculator up. So the first thing I want to do is there's 52 weeks in a year. That's how many weeks a year a police officer is going to work. Now let's say that you take 6 weeks of vacation. That's more vacation than I get, but let's just say I take 6 weeks of vacation off a year. So now I'm working 46 weeks out of the year. Out of that 46 weeks out of the year that I'm working, let's say I take 6 days of training per year. That's probably a day or two more than I actually take, but I do have 2 days of training up next week. I have to take 3 days for defensive tactics a year. That's 5. Yeah, that's actually pretty accurate. 6 days a year, probably more, probably 6 or 7 days a year. But let's say I'm working 40 weeks out of the year. 40 weeks times 5 days, that's 200 days a year that I am out on the road taking calls for service. Now, how often in one of these calls for service do I deal with a traumatic situation? The majority of the time, right? I take on average 10 to 15 dispatch calls for service a day. Those aren't all super heavy, super traumatic calls, but I think conservatively, I take two per day. You know, relatively speaking, about 2 traumatic calls per day for me. So that means over the course of a year, I'm experiencing 400 different traumatic events. And that's also not even counting the times that the event that I was going to wasn't super traumatic, but I had to gear up for it mentally while I was on the way there. You know, we get calls about people that are being threatened with guns, that there's a guy with a gun outside my house threatening to shoot me right now. You know, we're driving their lights and sirens. We get there, there's nobody there. We get calls about burglary in progress calls. You know, my ex-boyfriend just showed up. He just smashed my front window. He's coming in the house. He's going to try to kill me. I'm running lights and sirens trying to get there. I get there. There's no broken window. There's no ex-boyfriend. There was no entry made. Nothing happened, but I'm still experiencing the trauma of that event because as I'm preparing for that event while I'm driving there. So 400 times a year is probably a very conservative number. I've been a police officer for 13 years. That's 5,200 traumatic events that I deal with as a police officer. And the toll that it takes on me, while, you know, it might not show, it's still there. It still affects your brain chemistry, and the way you're going to respond to events in the future. Now, if I've had 5,200 events where I showed up and I'd used a tremendous amount of sympathy and I put myself in that shoes and I experienced that trauma with them, imagine the effect that that's going to have on my body. The defense mechanism that you kind of adapt and create to respond to these events is that you don't show so much sympathy and compassion to people. You just show up and do your job. This isn't something that I came to the job with. I didn't come to the job cold-hearted, not caring about people, not wanting to show people that I care. It's something, honestly, that I and basically every other police officer in the world has developed over the years. Now, I know that I personally have a bit of a reputation. I have a reputation for showing people sympathy and compassion on the street. I've got some more pictures. I've got them on this slide right here. The first one that I want to show is going to be this one. You know, this is a very popular video on my YouTube channel. This is an incident where I showed up and there was a homeless woman who was pregnant that wanted to go to rehab. I took her out to lunch. Because I felt bad because, you know, this incident was in 2019. It was prior to me becoming a police officer, or not becoming a police officer, prior to starting the body camera channel. I never knew that this was going to go on YouTube. I took her out for lunch and I left my camera recording the entire time because I didn't want, you know, if you pick a female up in your car and you say you're driving to a location, if it takes you a lot longer to get to that location than it should have, that's a signal that there might be something shady going on. So I left my body camera on the entire time because I didn't want there to ever be an accusation that I was doing something inappropriate with this woman. So it just so happened that I recorded the incident. Then a year later, I started the body camera channel. I remembered it. I went back and requested it, and I put it up online. But this is a situation where I'm recognized for showing a lot of compassion for somebody, right? And then also I have this right here. This is Scott Lewis, a friend of mine who I have dealt with many times over the years. Everybody says, all the interactions I have with him, like, oh my God, this officer is so sympathetic and compassionate. What a great guy. This is what police officers are supposed to be. I have a friendship with this guy. I helped him get into rehab on multiple occasions. I went and I sat down and I recorded 2 hours of footage with him, talking about his rehab experiences and all these other things. The only reason I'm bringing these up is because this is another part of the burnout that police officers experience. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to get the calculator off the screen. I'm going to pull up my other folder. One of the things that burns police officers out is the idea that, here, and I'll put this one up on the screen, is the idea that you show up and you show people a lot of sympathy, compassion. You think that you're the one that's going to help them, get them off the street, make their life better. You're going to change the world and all these other things. And that's what people say. And in the comments of these videos, I see that all the time. Like, oh, I hope she's doing well. I hope the baby's doing well. All the other stuff. I can tell you that this particular woman, her name is Sarah Armentrout. Her name is actually in the video. You can look her up on the Franklin County Clerk of Court's webpage. And I can tell you that she's not stayed clean and sober. She currently has a warrant for drug abuse or drug paraphernalia because she was stopped in a vehicle. I think she had some cocaine on her, and also had some crack pipes and some other materials. This is a, let's see, it's a 2020 case. If you look up at the top of the screen, 2020 is that case. She also has a warrant for soliciting. This is a prostitution warrant. This warrant was filed on November the 17th, 2023. She also has a second warrant for soliciting. This warrant was filed on November the 21st, 2023. So she was arrested and charged with soliciting for prostitution on the 17th, released, and then 4 days later, she was arrested again for the same crime. She does not have possession of that child. It's in the system, and she's still out there, still addicted to drugs, doing exactly what she was doing before I encountered her. This is something that you experience as a police officer. You show people a tremendous amount of care, sympathy, compassion, thinking that you're going to change their life. And then a couple months later, you see them doing the exact same things. It kind of gives you this experience that you're like, you know what? I did all that stuff before. This has been the result. Like the result of my care, compassion, and sympathy is right here. It's these warrants. Therefore, why should I put that effort in? And I'm not saying that I make a conscious decision to do those things, to like ignore people and this and that. But it definitely weighs on you, and it changes the way you respond to people. The other thing with Scott, I've got his picture right here. You know, you guys have followed his journey throughout the years. This was me talking to him in his rehab facility. He's sitting in a wheelchair right now. I can tell you that he walked out of this rehab facility, and I searched around with his mom for a couple of days. We ended up finding him. The way he was able to get out is he was doing his physical rehab and he was walking with a walker. The moment he was able to walk with a walker any measurable distance, he used that walker and he left the building. Got a ride over to the west side, got some meth. He was back to his old ways. I helped grab him, literally scoop him up, put him back in his mom's vehicle. She took him to the hospital. I made some calls. I made arrangements to get him put into a new rehab facility. He got settled into that rehab facility. He called me one day. We had a very good, hang on. We had I don't know how that video popped up, but there's Scott. This isn't the day that I went back and found him, but you know, he called me from rehab. We had a very good conversation. He was full of hope. He was apologetic for walking out of the facility, had a meeting or had a lunch date with his mom coming up. They were going to go to Olive Garden. I let about a week go by. I shot him a text to ask how lunch went with his mother, and I didn't hear back. The next day, I started getting bombed with Cash App requests from Scott. I then got a text message from his mom letting me know that he once again walked away from the rehab facility. And then as I was driving around on patrol, I saw him one day at one of his normal spots. He was standing out there with his walker, begging for drug money. These are the things that create the phenomenon known as compassion fatigue when it comes to police officers. When you see a police officer that is out in public, interacting with the public, and you don't think that that police officer is acting with the appropriate amount of sympathy and compassion, the thing I want you to know is that the police officer didn't come to the job that way. There was not training at the job that caused that police officer to be that way. It was actually the things the police officer sees and deals with during his interactions with the public that have made that police officer turn into the person that you saw that day. Everybody always says, oh, if I was him, I would have done this. If I was there, I would have done this. You might have the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, even the 20th time. I took the calculator down, but when you get to that 5,000th time or even the 400th time in your first year, you stop responding that way. It's not a training issue. It's the fact that we have police officers, we put them out on the street. We ask them to deal with the absolute worst aspects of our society on a daily basis, 400 times a year. As a police officer, I'm responding to the worst things that have ever happened. Fatal traffic crashes where people are dismembered and lying there dead in the driver's seat of their car, and I'm waiting for an ambulance to show up. Children that die in car accidents where this would have been a minor fender bender, but the kid wasn't in proper child restraints, and now they're dead. Children that stumble upon their parents' drug stash, take it, 3-month-old baby takes fentanyl and dies. Parents that get high, sleep with their children, roll over, lay on top of them, and suffocate them to death. Countless shootings. I responded to a call with a beautiful 16-year-old girl that was shot in the chest the other day. She's probably going to be paralyzed for the rest of her life. It was one of the most bloody and chaotic scenes I've ever experienced in my life. I experience these things day in and day out, and they have an effect on me and my personality. And the result of all of the things that I have experienced and the way it's changing my personality is that I get criticism from citizens who don't have the foggiest idea of what it is that I'm experiencing. I have politicians going on campaigns saying that they're going to change the way we hire police officers because we need to start hiring guardians instead of warriors. When people are criticizing police officers for not having compassion and sympathy on the street, criticizing police officers for playing it straight, just giving me your name, date of birth, address, phone number, and I'll load you onto a medic. When they're criticizing police officers for acting that way, what you're actually doing as a citizen that's levying that criticism is you're demonstrating your own lack of sympathy and compassion for police officers and what they're going through. This isn't like a woe is me, like I need a shoulder to cry on moment. This is just you have no idea what I'm experiencing on a daily basis. You need to do what you do, and you need to let me do what I do, and I'll deal with it myself. Don't sit there and tell me that I need more training when you don't know the training that I have or the experiences that I have and why I've developed these techniques over the years. I think that's it for me today, guys. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you later.